Hi everyone, I'm Simon from the project team of Loki. I'm here with what most of you would know as Jagerman, but his real name is Jason, to answer a few questions that you had here at the Loki Snapathon. So thanks for joining us, and we'll get right into it. So the first question that we actually got was, is Jason really Jagerman? And I have an answer for you people. Yes.
However,
Oh,
it gets more complicated.
really?
So, as I got involved in this community, I realized that everybody has a different nickname, and it's different from their real name, and it's different from their Telegram name, and it's different from their Discord name. So one of my objectives here is to make a decoder ring so I can sort of tell, okay, I can match all these people up.
So you want to create a database linking
Kind of.
people's identities?
Kind of,
This is
because
a
I have
privacy
been in a
project,
situation. You can still choose to reveal your privacy. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I am Jagerman.
Is that how you say it?
That's how I
Jagerman?
say
Or
it.
Jagerman?
Came from my name, actually. Jason.
Oh, well, yeah, Jason. But
My middle initial is G, so that's where the G comes from.
okay. You know, Jaeger means
I
hunter
do
in
know
German,
that.
right?
I do that. It's got the umlaut on the A, though. I don't have that.
Jager.
Yeah.
And, well, yeah, sure. why not?
Jägermeister, you know.
Our next question that we got was, I would like to know how long Jason's been programming and a little more about his qualifications. So I should just qualify this by saying that Jason got involved in the Loki project, probably a year ago? He started showing up in the Telegram chat, making some noise.
I showed up about a year ago, and then I kind of left for a few months, and then I came back and made more noise.
So, yeah, Jason has been a long time community member, and essentially as time has gone on, Jason has developed a number of tools that a lot of us use in the Loki ecosystem. So a lot of people use the Loki service node bot on Telegram. That's probably the main thing that people would know you for.
A lot of people just know me from constantly being around. But
that's right. You also had a lot of involvement in the discussions around governance and made some good points about the way that we disclose certain things, particularly in regards to the Loki Foundation. And so
that was probably a pivotal moment, was you and I having a very public and very intense discussion about governance issues. And I have to say, at the time, I was really impressed that you didn't just disappear and say, this is just some guy trying to raise hell. You actually engaged with me. And that was a big deal for me to come into the project.
Yeah.
Getting back to the question, I've been programming for several years. I don't want to reveal quite how old I am. I feel self-conscious about it. But I've really been programming since even before I finished high school. I have an undergraduate degree in computer science. Then I worked in computing for a while, doing programming. Then I left. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I went and studied economics for a long number of years as well. But even while I was doing that, I continued to program in my own research within that. So now I'm heading back into that for Loki, because I think it's a cool project.
Fantastic.
I can use what I picked up along the way.
Why are you afraid to reveal how old you are or how long you've been programming?
Because I'm the second oldest person on the team. And if something happens to the oldest person, I'll be the oldest person on the team.
I don't think that's such a bad thing. We're a pretty young team.
So I've been programming for maybe 20 years, give or take. It's hard to say exactly when you start, because when you sit at a computer and you write some little programs, is that really programming, or is that?
Yeah. So the second part of this question is, what is it that he'll be doing for Loki on the dev side of things?
So I will be working on the core currency side of things, and the first major task that I'm starting in on is going to be Blink. So we will have more to say about that once we've really hashed out some of the details. I don't want to say too much in case we have to.
Do you want to just give a brief
things,
overview of what Blink is for those that haven't read the white paper?
Yeah, so Blink is the idea that you can send instantly and have instant confirmation, but also have total security that your transaction will eventually hit the chain. Essentially it's that, because that's got to solve the major issue that people have, which is to send a payment, you've got to wait for confirmations. And I think for someone who's first getting in, this idea of confirmations is really foreign.
Yeah.
It's strange. If I go and I say, well, here's $5, you've got it, it's done.
Yeah. This idea
And
of
that's something
time,
that's
the
something
delayed settlement is really uncommon. It's very foreign in typical
is.
financial transactions that most people deal with, even though in reality, that sort of thing is happening on the back end of every credit card transaction that everyone does anyway. You just don't have that immediate interaction with it as you do in the cryptocurrency world. So, yeah.
So I think that would be a really cool thing for us to have. And we have that because of the service node layer that lets us do that, where you couldn't do it in a straight blockchain chain like Monero.
Yeah. This question is potentially a little bit contentious.
Uh-oh.
It says, I'm sad Jason was not allowed to contribute more in a previous unnamed project. Everyone knows what I'm referring to. Will he cut ties completely and focus on Loki?
Yes, I'm going to focus on Loki.
Does everyone know what we're talking about here?
I don't think I want to say it here. It's a competing currency.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody watching this who has followed me for a while will know what it is. I definitely have to cut back my engagement in that community. I don't think I'm just going to sort of cold turkey leave it and say, no, I'm done. But my focus now is definitely Loki.
Okay, cool. Any new super cool things about Loki in development that you are not quite ready to announce but kind of want to anyway? Yes. Definitely. But
we're not quite ready to announce.
Which is why we're not going to. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, that's what they call a leading question.
Yeah. There are quite a few things actually that have been discussed over this week, even, that I'm very excited about.
I think we did just announce that we're about to start on Blink.
Well,
currently later on in the
we've announced
roadmap.
Blink already. That's a feature that's been in the pipeline since day dot.
We're pulling it back because currently on the roadmap it's quite a bit later.
Yeah, that's true. But we have previously decided to put Blink in the priority queue, and then it's been at a later date retracted again because changing priorities, changing resourcing requirements of different things. So, but there are other things that have not yet been discussed openly that I'm excited about.
Part of the problem is you say, oh, we've got this cool idea in mind.
Yeah.
And you announce it, and then we realize that it's not going to work, or it's going to change, or it's going to be deprioritized, and then people get mad, and so...
Exactly. It's holding...
You got to be careful.
Unfortunately.
There are cool things. Stay tuned.
So I've got another question here. Jason, I understand you are working on your PhD in economics. From an economics perspective, what do you find interesting about Loki?
What's interesting? So the thing about economics is economics has a difficult time with money in general. To be honest, like people have to build fairly complicated models to even find a place for it. So I'm almost feeling that it's in some sense outside of economics as a currency. But the interesting things that we have in Loki are this incentive component for service nodes. And I think that's a really big thing here. That you look at what a lot of currencies are doing. They say, okay, well here's our inflation emission schedule, and it's sort of designed to go to zero, which is sort of designed to reward the early holders at the expense of later ones. Loki's maybe a bit more controversial with having kind of a flatter emission curve over time, but it's really about driving that incentive for the service nodes. And when you look at the white paper, if you have, there's a lot in there about worrying about incentives for people operating service nodes, for people trading in the currency, and so on. So there's some interesting stuff there on the incentive side of it.
I mean, when we went to do up our own economics paper, sort of explaining the existing emission curve and why, and a new proposed model to why we would change it, we didn't actually use any real traditional economics in that. We used some strategic game theory to help explain some of the occurrences in there, but really it was sort of outside the wheelhouse of any real models that have been generated in the past. It's sort of something that is so flexible and so disconnected from the real world in a lot of senses that it's almost something that exists in its own vacuum and can be tweaked and played with.
So I agree with you, having spent more than 10 years now studying economics. Economics is a useful tool set, but like just about any tool set, you can use it to sort of say whatever you want. So if you go too far, people will say, well, you're making ridiculous assumptions, but you got a lot of leeway. So, I mean, there are useful tools, statistics, the game theory side of stuff is used outside just economics. But you really can kind of say what you want. This is like the cynical view that I have of after having spent all these years in it. A lot of people think, well, you do something in economics and this gives you some sort of truth.
Yeah.
And it really isn't. It just gives you, here's something to support my argument.
Yeah.
Someone else could come along and say, well, I'm going to do it a different way. I have totally different conclusions, but also be totally solid economics. So, yeah, getting back to the original thing, incentives matter is kind of the how to describe economics in 2 words, and we've got that in Loki, so it's cool.
A big congrats to Jason for joining the team. Big congrats to the team for hiring Jason. Jason, what are your responsibilities in Loki? So I think for this question,
kind of answered that, but
yeah, but I think also perhaps not everyone understands your previous and current role in the foundation as well.
Yeah. So what I'm joining now is as a Loki developer, as I talked about a little while, working on the core currency side. But for the last few months, since January, I think, I've been a director in the Loki Foundation, which means basically overseeing things that get done in Loki, planning for things like where we're going, approving projects that get done from a kind of high-level overview. Things like choosing the exchange that we listed on, for example, that was a big deal. Going forward, as kind of the technical side, I'm trying to say, well, in my role as a director, I can really evaluate the technical side of what's happening in the Loki project through the Loki Foundation.
Have you decided upon a clear path for development between Loki Core and Loki Apps? There were 2 competing ideas a month ago. Any changes or still throwing ideas around? I think this is in reference to the request for comment that was put out maybe a couple of months ago. Yeah, it was a very long thread. And it was between Key and myself regarding the monetization strategy of the Loki network. And to answer the question, yes, there has been a fair bit more discussion. That thread was running for a long time and it's still running, I believe. Oh, maybe we closed it, yeah. I think there was a clearer model for monetization in the development of ancillary services like LokiNet and Loki Messenger, and that should be generally the priority, but at the same time, we've also just trying to balance things out a little bit more as well by making sure that we are continuing to develop interesting features on the core side of things to improve that user experience so we can also benefit from that.
I think the way it ended was essentially to say, yeah, we're not saying we're going to go this way or this way, we're saying we're going to kind of go both of these ways.
Yeah.
And so that's part of why I'm coming on, is to focus on the currency side and boost that team a little bit.
Because at the moment, the majority of the contributions for that side of the project is just coming from Doyle. And Doyle, while he's great,
sometimes other contributors, but mainly Doyle.
Yeah, mainly he's the only one actually working on it full time, and because everyone else is kind of hopping in and out of other projects as required, especially lately because we've been trying to get this full integration test network out for the Loki ecosystem as a whole, so to get the Onion Router and the Messenger all talking to each other and everything else. So that's been quite a challenge leading up to consensus, and now we've kind of got things working, roughly speaking, and there's going to be another few weeks of teething issues to sort out there, I imagine. But yeah, now we actually have someone else who's actually dedicated to furthering the development of the core side of things, so that is exciting. But no, there has been more discussions actually during this week about this monetization strategy, and one of the questions that we've been debating quite aggressively is what to do with the fees from things like Blink and the Loki name service and other monetization strategies that are based on usage of the network. And I mean, how much do you want to go into this topic? Because I think we could be here for
a little bit and talk about sort of, I think where we landed was essentially the idea that a lot of the fees for things that are going to rely on service nodes, like Blink transactions, for example, our idea is that instead of paying fees to particular service nodes, you're just going to burn those fees. They're just going to disappear.
Oh, so we have landed there, have we?
We have landed there. We've got
Yes.
to sort out exactly how much, so there may be a limit because we don't actually want the currency to run backwards.
Yeah.
Become deflationary. So we've got to work out some targets on it, but I think that we're on page now, saying we want to go that way.
That was if you haven't been able to tell already, that was my argument, and it appears that I've won. So I'm very happy to hear this.
I came around. I didn't feel all that strongly, so I gave in a little bit. You know?
Yeah. So the way I think I mentioned the burning part in the thread, or at least I was going to, and didn't end up
I think
publishing.
I mentioned it on Telegram a couple of days ago too.
Yeah.
That's where we were thinking about going.
I think the burning model is really good because instead of it doesn't actually do anything to affect any particular service node, but it provides a perfectly even distribution of value across the network. And so especially in the scenario where we do the thing with the checkpointing where we reduce the block reward of the miners and a lot more of it goes to the service nodes, and in that scenario you can actually offset all of the rewards that are created through the block reward by burning if there is enough usage. And of course you probably don't want to go backwards, and that's something we might have to do some modeling for. But anytime a transaction occurs where burning happens, that's value that's being permanently captured in the network, and it's not reducing the circulating supply, but it's preventing it from increasing. And so hopefully that drives more value in the network, which means the rewards that service nodes are being paid out are greater enough so they can offset operating costs, which will allow more service nodes to operate. It's a nice feedback loop.
And just quickly, our alternative thinking was saying, well, let's not burn it. Let's take all these fees and redirect them to service nodes. And I think in the end, why I came around to your point of view was saying, well, it's not going to really matter in the end. That we could do that where we're redirecting funds to service nodes and cut the emission, or we can just keep the emission higher and just burn the stuff. And in the end, it's going to be a wash. So it's easier just to say, let's burn it and keep emissions where we want it. And
it's a much simpler design. There's no complicated distribution algorithms that have to be developed. All we have to do is develop a method for burning, and that should be fairly straightforward. So, yeah.
So more details on exactly how we're going to work it to come, but that's the
that's
current
the
direction.
gist. How similar is Loki, the Loki network, to Tor? Have any comparisons been made for network traffic? How many Loki service nodes are necessary to match Tor traffic? So that's an interesting question. There's quite a few differences between LokiNet and Tor, and I think we can talk a lot about capacity, but it'd be purely theoretical because LokiNet in its current state is just on like an open test network sort of phase. So it's sort of strange to talk about what its capacity might be. I mean, we can talk about the particular qualities that differentiate LokiNet from Tor, but there's quite a few. I think the main thing to consider though is that LokiNet's a lot newer. It's got a lot of features and it's more protocol agnostic than Tor. It allows you to do more things via onion routing than Tor otherwise would. The only issue with it is that it's very, very new and it's not deployed to its fullest extent. It's got quite a ways to go before it's stable and reliable. And we've also got to do some work as well to make sure that the traffic that is going through the network is big enough and that there are enough paths going around to actually get a decent anonymity set about what's being used. And I think through the messenger we'll get exactly that.
I think there's some more fundamental differences too, such as the incentive to participate. So service nodes are going to be carrying this traffic, and we're giving you a reward for doing that, which is fundamentally different from the way Tor operates.
Yeah, and it makes
we went to Tor's session here a few days ago, and they really said they didn't want to move in that direction, and I understand why they don't, because that's how they've structured the project.
Yeah.
Loki from the ground up is, speaking with my economics experience, incentives matter, I think.
What I can tell you about the Tor network is that the vast majority of bandwidth is being routed by the top relays on the network. And that has some interesting security issues associated with it, because if you have the ability to spin up very high bandwidth nodes and run them for a length of time, you get bumped higher and higher up the list and you're assigned more and more paths. And that's really good for performance. But the issue with it is, if you happen to be some nefarious actor and you're the one running the top 100 highest bandwidth nodes on the network, you actually gain access to a very large percentage of traffic and can potentially do a lot of correlation attacks much cheaper than you otherwise would than running, 5,000 relays that you might expect from having a cursory glance at the design of onion routing
and
networks.
that's also where our economics come in. You want to do that on Loki, you're gonna have to obtain a lot of Loki to be able to run those stakes. So
the other thing about Loki is that because we have this incentive and sort of punishment structure, we can kind of tailor the network in such a way where we can encourage operators to run nodes with a certain bandwidth capacity, a minimum standard of bandwidth capacity. So while there are 8,000 relays on Tor, the vast majority of them route almost none of the traffic, and very top route almost all of it. It's sort of like a Pareto distribution sort of situation, whereas we can make sure that there is a minimum standard across all of them. So that allows us to provide a more even distribution of traffic amongst all the nodes. And we can also, we're experimenting with ideas around how we can encourage geographic distribution as well, because the more places connections bounce between, the greater anonymity you get from it, because you're moving between different jurisdictions, you're moving across different undersea cables, and while there may be slight performance degradation that occurs as a result of that, that is a property that Tor is not able to regulate because of the design of the network being free and open to anyone. And the result of that is that the vast majority of nodes end up being operated out of Germany, the Netherlands, and the USA, and that's not a great security model, considering there's, all of those connections are very easily monitored by European and US internet service providers and a lot of other people. So, there's a lot of concerns there that we can potentially address, but the geographic diversity one's something we've only really started talking about recently. In terms of capacity, we currently have about 500 service nodes that are active on the current main network, and when we enable LokiNet and exit node functionality, it's really an open discussion about what the minimum standard that we're going to set is. I think 1 megabyte per second as an absolute minimum is very low. I think we could go higher than that in terms of requirements.
that's a lot. We still have to determine.
Yeah. The thing is, though, we don't have the usage requirements at the moment, because we haven't been running for a decade like Tor has. We don't have that usage yet. So there's not anyone that joins the Loki network now is going to have pretty decent performance, but also a reduced anonymity set. So this is something that we're going to have to work through time.
I should just add one thing in there. You said we can do this a few times, but of course what you mean is we, the community, not we, the developers, are controlling this.
In what context?
You said, what was it? We can kick people off who aren't performing. But of course, that's a totally decentralized.
It wouldn't be we.
Decentralized rule set.
It would be we in the sense that whatever rules that we as a group of developers and as a community come to decide is the most appropriate approach, install on the network as rules, and then the rules are self-enforcing. So that on the decentralized network. So that's how it would.
I hope
shake out.
Everybody watching this knew that.
Well,
just in case.
I hope so. Yeah. Do you think the Loki Foundation would ever expand beyond current horizons? I wonder if the question is more about the membership base and how that has all panned out. The way the foundation works, and this is how almost every foundation operates that has a charitable status wherever they happen to be in the world, is that there is a membership base that directors can appoint new members, and members can literally be anyone. Then the members get to vote on who makes up the board of directors. The board of the directors are actually the ones that at any given time make the executive decisions about how money is spent, what's being worked on, who gets hired, who gets fired, so on and so forth. At the moment, we have a board of 5 directors, which you can learn more about at Loki.Foundation. That's actually got the full membership base there, I believe, as well. We're always open to people expressing interest in membership, and we have had a number of conversations with people over the last year or so about joining the foundation, and they've been able to come on board, and during the annual general meetings and just generally been able to provide advice and input into what happens. But being a director is a whole nother level of responsibility and work that has to be done. And almost every action the foundation takes goes through a board approval process, which is quite taxing. There's a lot of paperwork that has to be done. It's actually not a very fun experience, and there's a lot of difficult problems that have to be worked through as well. So,
and it's usually not that the board is sitting down and saying, we're going to decide what happens. We're taking feedback from the community, and kind of deciding based on what we've seen from members, from the community at large. It's not. We're not trying
it's
to
not
be,
like
here's a set of 5 dictators that are going to go out and say, here's where we're going.
We already have quite a big board by all accounts for, a project of this size. 5 people on a board of directors is actually quite a lot. We can have as many as 9 according to the Constitution, but I don't
think we want to go
that large. That's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want a board of 9 directors. That's crazy. Members, though, maybe that is something that we can discuss more with the community.
I don't think that we have a specific target number of members.
No.
We say, well, look, this person we think would be a valuable addition to the Loki Foundation membership, and that's when we'll recommend someone. So usually in a director's meeting, we start off by asking, any recommendations, and often we have 1 or 2.
Jason became a member of the foundation because he was prominent in the community for months, so we knew we knew how he thought. We knew that he cared about the governance side of things, and he was actually willing to argue with us about how we did things. So, they were very good. It was always really good to get that input. And we were like, well, we were thinking at the time, who would be asking for members, and what better people than people that actively care about the governance processes? Because I think, being interested in a project is very different from willing to invest a lot of time into thinking about and learning about all of the intricacies of the project and being able to make good decisions on behalf of everyone. It's a complicated issue. Can we see a demo of Loki Messenger in action? Yes.
I think we more or less answered that in the previous one.
I think do they want to see one now?
Can we show one now?
Can we show one now?
All right. Hello. I'm here to give a quick demo of the Loki Messenger, along with a nice little visualization tool I threw together to give some idea of what's going on in the background. So I'm gonna, first off, these are swarms where all the service nodes have been grouped into, and each of these swarms will be responsible for storing and retrieving a certain set of people's messages. So if I come in here and register my first guy 1, I'm not going to set a password. We're very anti-password here at Loki. They just waste a lot of time. So I'll start him up. There he is, guy 1. I'll bring in guy 2 so we can get a bit of conversation happening in this space. We need a lot more conversation, a lot of less action, So I'm going to copy guy 2's public key here, and he's going to send it on over to guy 1. I'm going to start a new conversation. Guy 1, he's just going to say, hey, how you going? It's guy 1 from the other night. Winky face. That's going to fire along. And now down in this visualization here, you'll see guy 1 is going to spread his message amongst the swarm. They're going to spread it amongst themselves, and guy 2 is going to come right on in here and retrieve that message. And as you can see here, guy 2 has received a lovely friend request from guy 1, who he's very fond of. So he's going to go ahead and accept that. Now what we're going to expect to see here is guy 2 is going to reply in the background with his acceptance to wherever guy 1's swarm is yet. I don't know where it is yet. Guy 1 will retrieve that, and then they should attempt to establish a peer-to-peer connection. So we'll watch that play out right now. So this is guy 1's swarm. Guy 1's going to yank that away. He's going to send another response in the background confirming that he's received it. And once guy 2 retrieves that, boom, they've set up a peer-to-peer connection. So now any messages that they send, so hey, nice to hear from you. I had a lot of fun. And as you can see, they go straight through, skipping all the proof of work, just straight to the action. Cool. See you then. Boom. Simple as that. Thank you, everybody. Let's get this sorted out for your time.
All right. Presently, crypto mining pays only a little more than the cost of electricity. Funny that. It is easy imagining service nodes will only make a little more than operating costs. Are there any plans to increase profits for service nodes?
I don't think it's true that service nodes will only earn operating costs, because there's this capacity constraint on the number of service nodes you can have on the network. You can always add more miners from anywhere, but
You can't add more service nodes. There's an
we're
upper limit.
almost 40% now.
Yeah.
And to go, we could probably go up to 60% without too much difficulty. But to start going beyond that, you're really restricting the available supply.
Yeah.
And that runs up the price a lot, which in turn makes it more profitable to operate these. So
I think
it's not like mining where more people coming on actually reduces your profits.
Yeah.
It's
well, there as an operator, there is an element of it reducing your profits because
there's a competitive component.
There's a competitive
For
component.
sure.
There's only so much reward, and there are X number of service nodes that get a share in that reward. And for every time X is increased, the overall reward that each one gets is reduced, obviously. But I think in terms of profitability is simply a function of whatever the current inflation rate is, which you can read a lot about in our economics paper, minus the real world dollar operating costs, which is something that we discussed a lot throughout the course of writing that economics paper. And I think that if we go down the path where Loki receives a lot of adoption and a lot of usage, and thus tokens get burnt more often because they're being used to buy usernames and make Blink transactions and all of that sort of thing, that reduces the current circulating supply in the market, which then in turn produces long-term positive price effects. That offsets the operating costs in real-world dollars for server hire and the work that it takes to actually maintain a service node by responding to letters and that sort of thing.
I have also seen some operators talking about the actual costs, and I have some idea of that. But and I think the general thinking is that your actual hosting costs now are maybe like a 5 or 10% of sort of the monthly earnings from a service node. So it's considerably more profitable to do that than to buy a bunch of video cards and mine locally.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the notion that service nodes will, like miners, degrade down to the lowest common denominator, where the hash rate will increase to the maximum possible point that the average hardware can cope for before it starts to become unprofitable, is just not true in this case. I think mining is this really interesting phenomenon because it used to be all about the hardware, because if you get the hardware, you can get the competitive edge. You could actually get to the point where you were much more profitable than other miners, and thus it was actually worth doing. But because mining has been happening for a long time now, and there's a lot of GPUs out there that no one wants because electricity costs have increased in various places, and obviously the overall value of the currencies being generated for miners has gone down. There's just a lot of hardware out there, and not a lot of people wanting to turn on their hardware and spend electricity to get the coins. So this means that you always end up on pretty much every coin, unless there's like an ASIC attack or something happening, where the hash rate equals price times inflation equals the amount of electricity being spent. It's like really, really stable, really obvious. That won't happen with service nodes. It's just not how the system is built.
That's partly also, to jump back into the economics, you want to add a bunch of mining onto the network, you're distorting the video card market.
Yeah.
If you want to add a bunch of service nodes on the network, you're distorting the Loki market, making the Loki more valuable, driving up the service node rewards, which is quite a fundamental difference.
Yeah.
So I agree that I don't think we're going to see that same having everything just descend to the basic cost.
Congratulations, Jason, on becoming a director of the foundation and becoming a Loki dev. Did you expect to have this much involvement in the project when you initially started getting involved?
No, definitely not at all. When I got involved, I happened to be looking around for a coin to diversify among. Most of my effort at that point was put into the coin that we didn't mention earlier. And coming into the Loki community, it grew on me, the community itself and the people involved, I mean the foundation and the actual dev team. That really grew on me, starting with, of course, our public argument about Loki Foundation stuff. As I said earlier, that was a big deal to me, and so that led to me getting more involved, and it's sort of been one step after another to increase my contributions, and now I guess I'm increasing them a lot, so we'll see how that works out.
Great. All right, well, that'll wrap it up for today, today's Q&A. We should probably do more of these. I've enjoyed the one with Sam, and I've enjoyed the one with you, so hopefully we get another one in before we leave New York. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.